I always like to play as many hands as possible on the button. We're early on in the session and I see 8 deuce offsuit. It gets around to the player in front of me. He makes it 12 and I decide to spice it up and 3-bet him to 55 bucks. People don't normally do this with hands this bad, but I decided to get crazy for some reason. It gets back around to the initial raiser. He flips over ace queen, mucks his cards. I take the pot. It's crazy. He folded ace queen to my 8 deuce preflop. I'm in late position with one of my favorite hands in poker, 10 jack suited of clubs. It gets to me. I raise to 10. The button calls for 10. There was a limper in there. He also calls for 10. We're going to the flop 3 ways, and it's a dream flop for me. Queen 10-4 with 2 clubs, and we flop middle pair. The first player checks. I decide to bet 17. I'm trying to keep everybody in the hand at this point because we flopped a high flush draw and also middle pair, so I want them to stick around. The button calls for 17. The other player folds. We're going to the turn, heads up. The turn comes the 4 of hearts. We don't hit the flush, but that's not a bad card for us. If he's drawing, I could easily win the pot here by betting bigger. Now I want him to fold the hand. So I bet $65 on the turn. He thinks for a little bit, eventually folds his cards, says I had nothing, but I didn't have nothing. I had middle pair and a flush draw. I had a big hand, and we take down a decent sized pot. We got the same hand as last time, 10 jack suited, and we're back on the button. There's a limper under the gun. It gets to me. I raise to 10. Small blind calls, big blind calls, and the limper raises to 35. So he limped and then he re-raised. I'm definitely going to call with 10 jack suited. The small blind calls, the big blind calls, everybody sticks in the hand. We're going to the flop 4 ways with a lot of money in the middle. The flop comes out 4-6 jack. We flop top pair and we also flop a flush draw. There's 2 clubs. It goes check, check. The guy who limped and then re-raised makes it $100 to go on the flop. And I have 320 bucks behind. So I decide to just shove all my chips in the middle at this point. I don't think I can go anywhere at any point, given the fact that I have top pair with a flush draw. He probably has an over pair at this point. I'm thinking he has kings, aces, or queens, but there's too much money involved in the hand and the price is too good to not continue. So I go all in. The next 2 players fold. The other player who bet 100 out on the flop, he thinks for a little bit and throws his chip in. He makes the call. And now we go to the run out. The turn is the jack of diamonds. The river's the 9 of spades. He flips over pocket aces. We make trip jacks. And we win a very big hand at 1-2 no limit. About $1,000 pot comes our way. That's a nice hand for me. We're on the button again with king, queen offsuit. There's a couple limpers in front of me. I raise it up to 10. Small blind folds, big blind folds. The other 2 players who limp call. We're going to a flop 3 ways. And it comes out an amazing flop for me. King 7-4 with 3 hearts. We flop top pair and we flop the second nut flush draw. It goes check, check to me. The first player checks. The second player leads for 15 on the flop. I come along. The other player folds. We're going heads up to the turn. The turn comes the queen of diamonds. We now have top 2 pair with the second nut flush draw. He checks. This is definitely a spot. I got to bet my hand. I have top 2 pair with the second nut flush draw. I got to be ahead at this point. I bet for 30 bucks on the turn. He pretty quickly calls. The river comes out the 9 of hearts. We make our flush. He checks. And I don't know what I was thinking. I check as well on the river. I flip over the queen of hearts for the second nut flush. He flips over ace king. I had him beat with my 2 pair anyway, but I don't know why I didn't bet on that river. Terrible play by me. We're on the button playing 1-2 no limit and we look down at pocket 10s. There's a few limpers in front of us. It gets to me. I make it 12 bucks to go. The big blind calls and the other 2 limpers also call. We're headed to the flop 4 ways. The dealer puts the flop at 6-7 deuce with 2 diamonds. We even overpair. Our hand's pretty strong to this flop. It gets checked around to me. I bet 25, which is 3/4 pot. I want less players in this hand if we're going to continue. But immediately the big blind goes all in for about 170, making it 145 more for me to call. The other two players fold and I go into the tank for a little bit. What could he possibly be going all in with here? The only hand that would make sense is a set because he's trying to dodge the flush. Otherwise, I don't think he has much here. So I decided to make the call for 145 more. The dealer quickly turns the cards. 4 of hearts, 8 of clubs. He flips over 10 jack for jack high. And we take down a nice sized pot and knock out another player. After taking down a pot, I now have pocket kings before racking up my chips. There's a few limpers in front of me. I raise it up to 12. I get 2 callers. We're going 3 ways to the flop with kings. And it's an amazing flop. It comes king, 3 deuce, 2 spades, but we flop top set. It goes check. The second player bets out. He makes it 17. And I could raise here, but I decided to just call the 17 to give my opponent an opportunity to bluff on the turn. The other player folds. We're headed to a turn. And we turn quads. The king of clubs comes. We now have a high hand, quad kings. My opponent checks. I decided to bet pretty small here because I want to keep him in the pot. I make it 35 bucks to go. He thinks for a little bit, and he actually somehow finds a fold. He folds his cards. We throw ours face up because we're getting a $200 bonus for hitting a high hand at the Red Rock. Pocket kings turns into a lot of money. We get another premium hand. Now we have pocket aces after getting kings in a few hands ago. I'm in the small blind now. There's a few limpers. It gets to me, and because I'm out of position, I make it $20 to go. Everybody else folds besides one player. I'm out of position. We're going to the flop. The flop comes king, king, 10, 2 hearts and 2 kings. Not a great flop for my hand. If he has any kind of high cards, he pretty much connects or has a draw with that flop. So I decide to check. He checks back pretty quickly. The turn card comes the 8 of diamonds. Another card that's not that great for my hand, so I check again. He checks again. We're going to the river. The deuce of clubs comes on the river. And now because my opponent checked twice, I lead out for 15 on the river to try to extract some value from my opponent. But he quickly throws his cards into the muck. We pretty much wasted pocket aces. I don't win a big hand there, but we didn't lose, so it's not that bad. There's a lot of pre-flop action in this hand. I have jack 9 of spades. Under the gun makes it 6 to go. The guy behind me then raises up to 20. I make the call with jack 9 of spades. We get a few more callers, and then the button goes all in pre-flop for 55. The under the gun raiser folds. And everybody else comes along. We're going 4 ways to a flop with $213 in the middle. The dealer puts out the flop, king 8-6 with 2 spades. We flop a flush draw and 2 backdoor straight draws. 1 player's all in, and there's 3 of us on the side. The first player checks. I check, hoping no more money goes into this pot. I hope I could see the turn and river for free. But the player behind me makes it 75 to go on the flop. The other player folds. I decide to call because there's a lot of money to win here. The deuce of clubs comes. I check, and my opponent goes all in. I immediately fold because we're only 17% to hit the flush at this point. And now it's the all-in player versus the aggressor. The river comes the 10 of hearts. The player who kept betting shows king deuce. He called 55 pre-flop with king deuce, and he hits 2 pair. He cracks pocket aces, and it's time that king deuce gets rewarded against pocket aces. Poker's just the craziest game. We picked this one up late. I got pocket 10s. There's 3 players in. It's $15. We're going to a flop. 9-9-7 comes with 2 diamonds. First player checks. I check. The other player checks. The turn card comes the 10 of diamonds, which is amazing, because it makes me a full house and it also makes a flush if somebody has it. First player checks. I bet 20 bucks on the turn. 1 player folds and another comes along. The river comes out the deuce of spades. First player checks. I decide to go all in. I overbet considerably to try to make my hand look like a bluff. My opponent then goes into the tank for a while. He thinks. He shows that he has a 9. He has 3 9s, 8 9 of clubs, throws his cards into the muck. He made an amazing fold. But honestly, what does he beat? There's a flush out there. There's a full house out there. His hand doesn't beat much at this point. So I got to give my opponent credit for making the fold there. Nice fold by him. We don't get the max value, but we still win a nice size pot.